Hello, welcome. I hope your coffee is warm. Today we are going to learn how to play Magic the Gathering. Or you are going to learn how to teach someone else how to play. For this video I have built two decks that you can use as starter decks. They will be simple enough so that you can immediately start playing with them for your first games. Right now they both cost just above $5 on the secondary market. That means that you won't be able to use them in tournaments yet. But throughout this series, we will build out these decks to be tournament viable. But for now, we will just go through an example game where I teach you everything that you will need to know for your first games. And I will show you some concepts that you can forget for now. Now let's go through these, and then later on we will do a deck of the two decks so that you can learn what each card does. At the beginning of the game, both players draw 7 cards. These cards are what you will use to get your opponent's 20 starting life down to 0 life. And how we will do this, we will learn throughout this game. Then every turn consists of 5 stages. The first one we will call untap, upkeep, draw. It helps to say these out loud so that you can remember them for later, but for now we can skip them. Then we go on to main phase 1. There are 2 of these main phases in which you will play most of your cards. Then there will be a combat phase in between the 2 main phases where you will try to attack your opponents with creatures that you have summoned. After the combat phase there is the second main phase or main phase 2 in which you can again play most cards, and then there will be an end step which will signal to your opponents that your turn is done. Let's look at the first turn. At the first turn we start by saying untap, upkeep, draw, but for now we can forget all of this. We go on to main phase 1. This is again the time you will play most cards, so here we will do the same thing. We will start by playing a land. For now I would advise you to start playing your lands immediately. Later on you can choose when to play your lands, but for now play them immediately so that you learn to remember to play a land each turn. Now, lands are your most important cards to play, but you can only play 1 land each turn. So you play 1 land and go on to the next part of your first main phase. This land we can tap for mana. This is a mountain which will create a red mana. There are 5 colors of mana in Magic the Gathering. There's white, blue, black, red and green. For now you can forget this because the starter decks each have just 1 color to keep things simple. But you could use multiple colors in a deck. Now that we have played a land and created our first red mana, we can use that mana to cast a spell. For now we have only one option, the Gitu Lava Runner, so we will cast it for 1 red mana. The mana costs of every card are shown in the top right of any card. Looking at another example like Viashino Pyromancer here, this cost could also show a number instead of a red mana. You can pay for this part with the cost of any color mana, but the red symbol has to be paid with red mana. For now there's only red in this deck, so that means just that Viashino Pyromancer costs 2 mana in total, and that means that we cannot play it here. So if we pay the cost for the Gitu Lava Runner, we can play it, and we're playing a creature here. So think of it as if we have summoned this man onto the battlefield. We can place it there and for now forget about the rest. This is the first step towards winning the game, because we need creatures to attack and deal damage to our opponents so that we get their life totals from 20 to 0. For now, we have used all of our resources, so we have had a pretty successful turn. It's nice to keep it exactly to this. We have some other phases, but we will skip them for now to keep things simple. We will signal that our turn is over by saying we go to our end step and our opponent may go. Now we move to player 2 and we go through the phases again. Untap, upkeep and draw. Now there is a rule in Magic where the first player will not draw on their first turn. This is to keep things fair, as starting is a big advantage, as you will see. So the second player will draw a card on draw in untap, upkeep, draw. Now pro tip, Keep a land and the cards or cards you want to play to the front. This way you can think ahead in terms of what you want to play your next turn. In this way you will be a bit faster and you will need to think less. Now the second player will play their first land, which they have put to the left or to the front of their hand. This is a swamp that will create black mana. We use this to play an enchantment, which is a spell that you can stick on the battlefield, on a player or on a creature. In this case, that weight will give a creature 2 less toughness and 2 less power. This will give Gitu Lava Runner 0 toughness, and if a creature reaches 0 toughness, they die. So it and the enchantment stuck to it will be moved to the graveyard, where they will not affect the battlefield and we can forget them for now, which makes things easier. To see a creature's power and toughness, you look at the numbers on the bottom right. The first is their power, which we will get to in a bit, and the second is their toughness, which we have just explained to be 2 for the Gitu Lava Runner. We skip the combat phase again and main phase 2 and go to the end step. It's now player 1's turn, they untap, upkeep, draw, and on untap they can untap all of their tapped cards. As they have tapped a land for mana, they can now untap it again for use this turn. Upkeep we skip, and then draw means they get a new card from their deck. They will play their second land and they can now play the Viashino Pyromancer, which costs 2 mana. Its ability deals 2 damage to the opponent, so their life total goes from 20 to 18. Note that we haven't attacked yet. That's because most creatures in Magic are tired after getting summoned. We call this summoning sickness, and it means that a creature cannot tap on the turn they're summoned. As player 1 can't attack and has no mana, they pass the turn again. Player 2 untaps their lands, skips upkeep and draws, and they play their second land and can now play the Agate Blade Assassin. It has summoning sickness and player 2 has no mana left, so they skip to their end step. Player 1 untaps their 2 lands, upkeeps and draws. They play a land and play Borcupine. They could attack with the Pyromancer, which is a 2/1, but how attacking works is that the player whose turn it is chooses the creatures they want to attack with. If player 1 attacks with the 2/1, for example, player 2 can then choose which creatures to block with. Any untapped creature they control can block any creature you are attacking with. For now. Their Assassin, which is a 1/3, could block. Damage is then calculated by the power of both creatures being subtracted from the toughness of the other. The Pyromancer is a 2/1, so it will deal 2 power or 2 damage to the Assassin, making it go from 3 toughness to 1 toughness. It survives. The Assassin deals 1 damage to the Pyromancer and it goes from 1 toughness to 0 toughness, so it dies. All of this damage is removed during the end step phase, so the Assassin will then return to full health, but the Pyromancer would be gone. That is not a good situation for player 1, so player 1 was right not to attack. If the Pyromancer would not be blocked by our opponent's creature, which is a choice, the Pyromancer would deal 2 damage to their life total. While attacking, you always need to think about what your opponent would do and if you would be happy with the outcome of that. In this case, blocking is right for them, so we'd rather not have this. Player 2 untaps their lands, upkeeps and draws, so they draw a card. They play a land and play their Vampire Spawn. This costs 3 mana, and then when it enters the battlefield it deals 2 damage to player 1 and at the same time heals us for 2 life. It has summoning sickness, but the Assassin that player 2 played earlier could still attack. It could be blocked by the Boar and the Pyromancer, because any player can block a creature with multiple creatures. In this case, the Assassin would be dealt 2 damage from the Boar and 2 damage from the Pyromancer, and that 4 total damage would kill it because it has 3 toughness. You can choose which creature gets 1 damage from the Assassin, and that would allow you to kill the Pyromancer, but Player 2 chooses not to have this happen and they pass their turn. Player 1 untaps, upkeeps and draws. They pay 2 mana for Thrill of Possibility. That is an instant, which along with sorceries are real magic in Magic the Gathering. Instants, unlike enchantments and creatures, don't stick around and just have a temporary one-time effect. So this time, Thrill of Possibility forces you to discard a card as an additional cost. So you pay 2 mana and discard a card, and then lets you draw 2 cards. Now something weird happens. As we have Porcupine on the battlefield, its effect gets triggered. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. As we have played a spell that is not a creature, so a non-creature spell, it was an instant, its effect, the Porcupine's effect, gives him the counter. A +1/+1 counter gives a creature an extra power and an extra toughness, hence +1/+1. Transforming the 2/2 into a 3/3 forever. You can show a creature has a +1 counter by putting a dice on it with 1 pip up. That's convenient because you can easily turn 2 pips up once it has 2 +1/+1 counters. After this trigger, the Thrill of Possibility goes off and player 1 draws 2 cards. They play the mountain they drew and then they do something complicated that you can forget for now because it is a little bit advanced for a first game. But I will show you once so you have seen it. Player 1 goes to the combat phase, attacks with the boar. It's a 3/3 now and can be blocked by player 2's 2/3 and 1/3. That would kill the boar and allow player 1 to kill one of the opponent's creatures with 3 toughness. Player 2 likes this and blocks with both creatures. But that was a mistake, because player 1 has an instant, and that goes against the rule that most cards are played during your main phases. Instants, unlike sorceries, can be played as a reaction to anything, like blockers being declared, for example. So, before damage is dished out, player 1 plays Shock. That is an instant which triggers the boar. As it is an instant, it is not a creature and it is a spell. And that turns the boar into a 4/4 because it adds a +1 counter to it. Shock then deals 2 damage to the opponent's vampire. Shock could deal 2 damage to any target, like the opponent's life total, but player 1 chooses the vampire to be dealt 2 damage. That leaves the vampire with 1 toughness. Then the vampire and the assassin deal a total of 3 damage to the boar, and then it survives with 1 toughness. Then the boar can deal 4 damage to the remaining creatures. 3 damage to the assassin and 1 damage to the vampire, which already had 2 damage and then will also die. Player 2's creatures both die and the boar from player 1 is still alive. Had player 1 used Shock on player 2's life total, they would be left with 1 creature. So this was a nice play by player 1. This game goes on until one of the players is left with 0 life. But for now you have seen almost everything that can happen in a game. I will now go over both decks, explaining each card a bit further. This is still nice to learn as a new player, but probably if you are an existing player you don't need to learn all of this. So I think you can skip it, but definitely if you're a new player go through these deck decks. Let's start with the deck tech for the red deck, which will later turn into a Temur deck that is a little bit of a combo deck. This means that it will have red, green and blue, and that will mean that it will be way more controlling than it is right now. Let's just say that. But right now we have an aggressive deck, and right now it does have a lot of instants and sorceries. That is because later on it will turn into an instant and sorcery deck too. So you can get used to the fact that you are working with them. Now this deck starts off with some that we know, like Shock. This one is a 1 mana red instant that deals 2 damage to any target. In these games you can use this to remove a smaller creature from your opponents, deal some extra damage to it when it is already dealt some damage, or just deal direct damage to your opponent's life total. This can sometimes be useful, but many times it is more useful to remove a creature from your opponents. This one we have also seen. This is Gitu Lava Runner, but we haven't really seen it pop off yet, because it starts off as a 1 mana, 1 power, 2 toughness creature, but later on it says as long as there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, this creature gets an extra power and will get haste. Now, 2 things that you need to learn here. One is instants and sorceries. We have, I think, only instants here. So that's pretty easy. You have some instants. These deal damage usually, or they can draw you some cards like we have seen with Thrill of Possibility. You need to play 2, they will immediately go to your graveyard, and then Gitu Lava Runner will become at least a 2/2 and it will gain haste. That is the second thing that you will need to learn. This is an ability that enables a creature to immediately attack after it was played. So a creature can attack and tap as soon as it comes under your control. It says so on the Gitu Lava Runner 2, so you have a little bit of a reminder, which is on purpose. Other card is Felonious Rage. This is an instant that just gives a creature 2 extra power. Something else you can do with this is that when the creature dies, you will get a 2/2 back. This is a token, which is not really a creature. Well, it is still a creature, but it is not your usual creature because it is not really in your deck. This will just immediately be created and you will get this 2/2. You could get exactly this 2/2, but for now you can have any 2/2 be fine. And in the other deck there will be other tokens which will also be exactly a 2/2. As you can see here, the total amount of money that you will need to spend is a little bit over $5, and this is mostly because of the lands. These you can often pick up for free at your game store nearby. Viashino Pyromancer we have seen before. This deals 2 damage to target player, so your opponent, and will be a 2/1. This shows that this deck is way more about being aggressive. Thrill of Possibility, again, you pay 2 mana for this instant and then you can discard a card. You have to discard a card and you can draw 2 cards. Lightning Strike is the same as Shock, it just costs 1 mana more and deals 3 damage instead of 2. I think the same goes for Flame Lash, which is also an instant, deals 4 damage and costs 4 mana, so I have many cards in here that do the same thing, because that will make it easier for you to learn the deck. Now there are some that do something different. We have Brazen Scourge, which is another creature with haste, so that you can get used to these what we call keywords, like haste is something that can just be stated, and it will just say haste without this little reminder text after it. But right now you will need to learn what is haste first, before you start playing cards that are way more complicated with many words like this that will all mean different things. So this will make it way easier. Brazen Scourge just a 3/3, so a bit bigger, and it will be able to immediately attack. And then Porcupine we have seen is a little bit more complicated, but will be fun because it can get out of hand a bit with all of these instants that you are playing. Because every instant that you will be playing in this deck will get this A+1 counter. And Gutter Snipe says that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, but in this case mostly instants, Gutter Snipe will deal 2 damage to your opponent. It says each opponent because you could also play with multiple opponents, but in this case we are of course playing with just one, which will make it a bit easier, because then every time you will just deal 2 damage whenever you play an instant. The black deck will later on turn into an Esper Pixie deck. This will give this deck an extra color of white and an extra color of blue. In this way, you will make sure that you have played every color if you have played these 2 decks. But for now it is a mono black deck, meaning it has just that color. It starts off a little bit more controlling. It has an enchantment already, so that you can get used to enchantments. Enchantments stay around on a creature turn after turn, so they don't just go away after doing their effect. In this case, it gives a creature -2/-2, so it becomes 2 power. It loses 2 power and loses 2 toughness. This can be used as a removal if the creature only has 2 toughness or has some damage on it already, for example. But it could also use to make, for example, a 3/3 a little bit less strong, so it will only be a 1/1. There are multiple uses for enchantments, so it is nice to already learn how to use them. Other than that, we have some cards that do a little bit of the same thing. We have Sanguine Siphoner and the Agate Blade Assassin, which do the same thing. They are 1/3s for 2 mana, and whenever they attack, the other player, the opponent or the defending player, loses a life and you gain a life. And then there is another removal, Moment of Craving, which is sort of the same as Dead Weight, but then also gains you 2 life, but it is on an instant and not on an enchantment, so that you can learn the difference. For 3 mana, we have Vault Plunderer, which is a 3/1 that also allows you to draw a card. But you have to lose a life. You could target an opponent with this, so that they lose the life, but usually drawing a card is way better, way better than than having an extra life. Vampire Spawn is a 2/3 that we have seen that deals 2 damage when it enters and also gains you 2 life. Risky Shortcut is a sorcery, so it cannot be played at instant speed like an instant. It has to be played on a main phase or during a main phase, and then it allows you to draw 2 cards and each player will lose 2 life. And then we have Murder, which is very simple, 3 mana to destroy a creature at instant speed. So it doesn't matter how big it is, it will just get destroyed and will be put into the graveyard. Highborn Vampire is rather simple. It is 4 mana for a 4/3. So that is really nice, so that you can block any creature from the rec deck, I think, except for the Porcupine if it is getting too big. Then for 6 mana we have 2 cards as well. This deck is already a bit more controlling, so that you have 1 aggressive deck and 1 controlling decks, and you can see how it works. We have Malfelt Twins, which is a 6 mana 4/4, so very good to block creatures with. But then when it dies, you create 2 2/2s. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it is not a black zombie at this moment, but it will be nice to have them actually. And Abyssal Gorestalker, which is a bit situational and a bit more complex. It is a 6/6, so biggest creature that we have seen yet. And when it enters, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So it would be best if you already have 2 creatures that you don't mind disposing of. Putting into the graveyard. That would be best, because then you will be left with a 6/6, which can definitely defeat anything the red deck throws at you. Except for sometimes the Porcupine again. And it allows you to force your opponent to sacrifice 2 creatures too. So it is controlling like that. You could also play it just as a creature when you have nothing on the battlefield yet. Then your opponent will still be forced to sacrifice 2 creatures too. So it can be a control option in that way too. This deck is really more focused on getting the red deck not to do its thing. And making sure that you win that way. It will be fun, and I advise you to finish the games that you are playing. Definitely if you are playing them with friends, so that you can learn a bit more about how the end game also works. Often, if the game goes long, the black deck will win, but sometimes as the red deck you can still get a win out of there with some of your reach spells, that means that deal direct damage to your opponent's life total. So that is it for these 2 decks. I want to thank you again for watching, and this series will actually go on by every time upgrading the deck a little bit and making it more complex, teaching you more subtle things of Magic the Gathering, getting more into timing, for example, or all the things that you could do with combat. And eventually going into Commander, which this channel is actually about. But I wanted this to keep to be a simple deck with which you can learn Magic the Gathering in a fun way, while still building towards something that you can use later. So yes, tell me what you have learned, tell me what you still have to learn or questions you have, and I will definitely answer them. And also I want to thank you because the channel has recently gotten to 1,000 subscribers, which is a cool thing, but also something I have worked hard for, and also that everyone that has supported me has worked hard for too. So I want to thank you again for that. And with that, I wish you a very nice day. Bye.